I think we're live, and I want to welcome first our audience to another in our series of Impossible Talks. My name is Adam Bello, and I am a member of the New World Network. And together today, we're very pleased to welcome representatives of an international organization devoted to building bridges and overcoming difference and inspiring a more positive, heart-centered activism among the younger generation. We're very excited to connect with them, and because their goals are so much in alignment with our values and beliefs. So I'm going to briefly introduce our guests, and then I'm going to open up our conversation. I hope that you'll stick with us and enjoy it. And I will, by the way, just invite, for those who may be listening in real time, any comments or questions that you may have, please type them into the comment bar to the right of the screen, and I'll be happy to bring them up in the course of our conversation. So to begin with, Jonathan Ampalour, who is one of the co-founders of Bridge USA. Jonathan is a graduate of UC Berkeley, and he currently manages marketing, finance, and international growth at Bridge USA. And we'll come back to Jonathan in a moment, because I want to talk to him about the origins of Bridge USA and its original purposes and how it has grown to become an international effort. Then there's Konstantin Reiners, who's based, I believe, in Germany, and is the, what is your role? You are
CEO of Bridge.
CEO of Bridge, CEO of Bridge Europe, and we'll talk to you about what is exciting young people in Europe today. And then Belinda Odek, who's based in Kenya, and is the CEO of Bridge Africa. We'll be particularly interested to hear what she has to say about what is going on in Africa, what young people are motivated by. And one of the things, as I said to our guests a few minutes ago, that particularly interests us is that their ability to provide a perspective on their whole generation from a global perspective, because this seems to be a generation that is much more connected and has much more sense of common interest and purpose than previous generations of young people who have been moved to engage in activism and social change. So I hope we'll get into that and welcome your questions as we go forward. So let's start with Jonathan, just for historical chronological sequence. Jonathan, can you tell us what gave you the idea to form Bridge USA? I think you were a freshman at the time.
I was, yeah.
You did. What made you feel that you had to do something of that nature?
Definitely, yeah. So just taking a quick step back. So Bridge initially started at the Notre Dame campus and at Colorado Boulder, where two students that were kind of working on similar things just happened to meet each other and decided, oh, we should work together to create something and help other students kind of start up. And this was in 2016, I believe, when Bridge first got established across these two campuses. So flash forward to my freshman year at Berkeley. This was, I believe, in February, when a right-wing kind of self-described provocateur came to campus named Milo Yiannopoulos. And what this kind of led to on campus were this strong reaction with protests from students and from people who from outside in the community, whether it's like Antifa or Black Bloc groups who kind of came into our campus and started protesting the speaker. And this led to a lot of like damage of like their student union building, violence, attacking each other, destruction in the local community. And I remember I was sitting across the street in like a cafe, just doing some work. I think I was having a conversation with someone. We thought there were like gunshots going off outside. And I was just shocked. I was like, what is happening here, right? And we walk outside and see all this happening and ask people, what is going on? Why is this happening? And people say it's because there's a protest around a speaker that came to campus. And whether you disagree with that speaker or not, um, I certainly didn't believe that was the best way in which to go about shutting down or stopping that speaker from speaking on campus. And I felt that if you did disagree with the speaker, a far better way to express yourself and get other people to understand what you are thinking would be to engage in conversation and refute the speaker's points, or simply just don't show up and not give the speaker an audience, right? And in that moment, as we were talking to like my group of friends and other people, we realized that there were a lot of other people that felt the same way. Oftentimes the narrative that you hear is many young people just are not willing to engage, are just trying to tear things apart, and are don't really care about what already exists, right? And how we can move forward together. And we found that a lot of people did care about that, and a lot of people wanted that. And we decided we need to do something. Myself and a group of other people um, decided to start Bridge at Berkeley and host a discussion the following week. And we were shocked with how many people came to that event from all different ages, all different beliefs, from the community, from campus, professors. And everyone was there just to understand each other and to talk to each other and figure out what exactly is going on in our community. And I think that was where I really got started with Bridge at Berkeley, and how we started to grow. Now, going forward over the following months, we started working at the national level, trying to bring people at different campuses who also felt the same way, and give them an opportunity to do what we were doing at the Berkeley campus, at Notre Dame, and at Boulder, and give people the opportunity to share their perspectives, to understand what other people are thinking, to start getting engaged in politics. Because say you're a young student just coming to campus, you're just now starting to form your political beliefs. You're just now starting to understand how you can impact the world around you. And far too often, we don't provide a pathway for people to really kind of start creating that change. And we wanted to really spread that to other campuses who are looking for the same thing. So over the past couple of years, we've been expanding to different campuses. And that's when we met David Reuter, who helped found Bridge Europe. And David Reuter was someone who was in a class with me back at Berkeley when he was an exchange student, decided to start Bridge Europe, and then that's how Bridge Europe got started there. And I'll let Belinda and Cons talk about how Bridge Europe has grown and how Belinda started Bridge Africa as well.
Thanks very much for that introduction. Before we bring in your colleagues, can you tell us a little bit about your program, your activities, what it is that you actually do?
Yeah, definitely. So our goal is to really build a pipeline of civic engagement where young people who are coming in, whether it's from high school or young people who just get to campus, are taught are given the skills and the abilities and the training to be lifelong effective civic actors. And what that basically looks like is, at our college chapters, we help students kind of learn to be comfortable with viewpoint diversity and understand different perspectives. We teach empathetic engagement, constructive engagement, where people are able to understand the values and the reasons as to why other people believe what they do in their stories, and understand how then they could work together to move forward with a solution-oriented mindset. Not necessarily forcing compromise or anything, but understanding that when we understand, or when we know other people's values and know why people believe what they do, we are far more able to create effective action out of it. Then the next step of our program is the Bridge Institute, where we help students apply what they've learned from their chapters and apply what they've started to discover to causes that they care about themselves. What this often looks like is different internships or writing opportunities, potentially even job placements with other effective organizations that we are partnered with. And we help students get the access to these positions where they can apply the Bridge mindset to create impact in the political space in which ways that they want to. And through this pipeline, we create these lifelong civic actors who, once they leave college, are able to engage in any field that they are in, whether it's medicine, business, law, politics, whatever you want. Students can engage with this Bridge mindset in place of viewpoint diversity, constructive engagement, and solution-oriented action, which really prepares them to be effective actors in no matter what, in anything that they do.
Thanks very much for that. We're going to come back and dig a little deeper into the nature
Definitely.
of your program and what you've learned from doing this kind of work. Konstantin, can I just turn to you briefly and ask you to tell us how you heard about this program and what motivated you to become a participant? Maybe Konstantin is not hearing.
I'm so sorry, but question. I just had an action problem. I couldn't understand the question.
Thanks for explaining that. I was just asking if you would briefly explain to us how you heard about the Bridge program and what motivated you to become involved.
Okay, so the first time I heard was USA also existed, or that actually Bridge is kind of the mother of our organization. Or what happened was that my asked me if I wanted to help him at a student association, social media bubbles and echo chambers. And so first of all, what I did was just helping him with that particular event, and we prepared a presentation about the issue of social media bubbles, the issue of echo chambers, the research that has been done in that field, and then the day of that event came, and we were holding that presentation for about 20 minutes, and we had prepared political speed dating, as we call that, at Bridge Europe. So we had prepared small sheets of paper with questions, and every 2 minutes we would give a signal to the audience, and everyone was walking around in that big room. And whenever the signal for change came, you would try to find a new partner and discuss an issue you had on your small piece of paper. And that event was, for me, really an eye-opening experience in Maastricht, because on that evening I had great discussions. And what I also experienced was that the format Bridge Europe applies at its events really encourage debate and encourage students to speak up and also to express opinions which maybe are not the mainstream at university campuses. So, for example, that particular format of political speed dating led to a situation where you were only facing one person, and you were only two people discussing in a room with a lot of others, of course, but you two had a dialogue about a specific issue. And that kind of format also enabled some students that I knew but had never discussed politics with to express their opinions towards me. And I had never these opinions. And I kind of discovered the potential of Bridge Europe and what it's doing, and wanted to get involved immediately.
Thank you very much. Belinda, I'm going to turn to you. I'll just preface my introduction by saying that it's our perception in the U.S. that there's a lot of similarity between the U.S. and Europe, and that has been the case for a long time, particularly at the level of youth activism and what motivates young people. What is it like in Africa from that point of view? Do you have the same kinds of problems, particularly the problems generated by social media bubbles, echo chambers? Are the issues different? These are the questions that I'm interested in hearing you address. But first, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became involved in this work?
Okay, so I am the African team lead for the Bridge movement in Africa, but I'm also a co-founder of Young Africans for Opportunities, where we are working to create opportunities for young people and teach them to rely on themselves other than rely on government. And then I also occasionally I write about politics, development, and governance. So I have a little backstory for the reason why I joined the Bridge movement. So I come from a polygamous family, and Africa as a whole suffers from has a very polarized political climate. And in Kenya particularly, before and after every elections, we have election violence that goes on. So in 2007, I had a first-hand experience of this with my family. So I vowed that I will have to found an organization or join an organization that is working to fix the polarized political climate that we have in Kenya and in Africa as a whole. So my dad had 4 wives. And out of the 4 wives, 3 of them were able to give birth to children. Then one was not able to give birth to children. So the one who was not able to get children was working with SOS Children's Village, which is the largest non-profit organization that is working to give parental care to children without families and families at risk. So she was taking care of 12 children from different tribes in Kenya. And our political climate is very ethnocentric in Kenya. So in my family, I have foster brothers and sisters from other tribes in Kenya. So what happens in Kenya is that during elections, you have to be within your community. Because, for example, if I am in a community where I don't belong, for example, if I'm in a community that is dominated by the Kikuyus and I am Luo, then I can get myself killed or harmed because they view you as as an enemy during elections. So we are having post-election violence, and then my dad has like 12 children from 4 different tribes in Kenya as his foster children. So there were motorbike people who threatened to come and ban our family because they said we either release them or they come and ban our house because they don't belong to the Luo community. So I said, you know what, one day I have to fix this. So in December 2019, I was talking to David Rutter, the founder of Bridge Europe, and he told me about Bridge USA and Bridge Europe. And I said, you know what, I think this is the perfect platform for me. So that is how I founded the African chapter of the Bridge movement.
Well, your background sounds very complicated, and certainly African societies that are based in tribal groupings and also have different views of how society and should be organized, how economic policy should be made. This makes things very complex.
Yes.
And I gather also that there's a lot more open corruption and police violence and repression, press censorship, problems that are associated with developing societies that create difficulty for anybody trying to organize and to solve problems. In your view, what is the thing that connects young people across the continent of Africa and gives them, what do they have in common? One might ask.
Well, all the young people in Africa, we collectively suffer from the effects of bad policies that are being passed around by governments. So that is what motivates us to start the initiatives that we start. And that is what motivates us to get together and try to sort out some of these issues. So for example, we have repressive policies on employment, policies that deny us our personal freedoms, policies that heighten inequality gaps, and therefore, so that is what brings young people together in Africa.
And are you running the same kinds of programs in Africa that are run in the US and Europe?
Yes, so Bridge Africa is basically following the model of Bridge USA and Bridge Europe. And so we have replicated their programs. You're still working on it because we just started last year, March, to just sort of run the same programs that they run in Africa. But in my case, we have to try and customize it to fit in our society because not everything that works in Europe and US will work in Africa.
Mm-hmm. So in what way would you describe that kind of customizing? How is it different?
Okay, so what we do is we use different methods to run our Bridge Africa programs. For example, we do a lot of advocacy on social media to address pertinent issues that we have. And then we also have students' events that we organize in collaboration with university administrations, where we create a very friendly environment for students to freely air their views on issues that are affecting them. And then we also give our students an opportunity to write articles for our blog to challenge status quo on different issues. Then you also try to form partnerships with like-minded organizations so we can organize platforms to have these conversations that are seeking to influence public policy. And then in the recent past, we've had, for example, some events that unite the three of us, that is Bridge USA and Bridge Europe and Bridge Africa. So for example, recently we had a conversation on Zoom where we were just focusing on police reform globally. And so we are focusing on Kenya, police brutality and police reform in Kenya. And we had the executive director of Kenya Human Rights Commission just talk to us about the pre-colonial and post-colonial police reform, policing in Kenya. And so, yeah, those are some of the programs that you're working on. But also currently we're working on a few community projects. We're trying to reach out to the community because mostly we work with the students community. So we're trying to reach out to our community leaders on a project called Listening Tour. So we will be speaking to a few community leaders to focus on issues that are affecting us, to hear their views, and then we can start, coming up, working together to come up with solutions to address some of these issues that we have.
Adam, you're...
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was muted. I want to go back to the question that I raised at the beginning, which is what do you feel? So you're an international activist group. Each of you operates in a different cultural arena. There are obviously differences. What do you find in common? As I said before, I'm very interested in understanding what your generation of young people agrees upon. First of all, it's very encouraging to hear from all of you that young people expect there to be disagreement, and that they're prepared to engage and to take seriously other people's perspective. We don't, at the moment, we in the U.S. don't see a lot of that. It's not clear that older people are prepared to engage difference and otherness. And I would be very sorry to hear that that's the case for younger people, not just here, but abroad. But what are the things that you feel, like the issues that unite younger people? I would assume, for example, that concern about the environment would be a global concern. Is that uppermost for each of you in your areas?
So I can speak for, I guess, like what we see and what we usually talk about at Bridge USA, but Belinda or Constantine, feel free to let me know if you guys have something different. What we often see is like young people are very issue driven, right? So in the sense that a lot of people are focused heavily on work in one issue, whether that's environment, whether that's social justice, whatever it may be. A lot of young people are focused more on issues than, say, like party or overall just like broad-based reform, right? What we often see as the common theme, or things that we see most young people caring about in terms of issues, are economy and like economic mobility specifically, environment, and like the issues that deal with climate policy, and democracy reform. So that's effective governance is something that young people really want to see, because at least in the US, for many young people, all they've seen is the gridlock during Obama's presidency, a lot of partisanship and polarization during Trump's presidency. There isn't really a picture of effective united government. And that's what young people really want to see as well. So I'd say those are the three that at least stand out to us and what we see as the generational issues, but not to say that any one of those issues or any other issues don't matter or matter more. It's just, this is what is often discussed.
Constantine, is that true in Europe in general? Is that a fair description of what your membership is concerned with?
Yeah, definitely. That's true. That our generation is more issue focused, or a lot of young people in our generation are very issue focused. So they most of them have one or two issues they are focused on the most, maybe for example feminism or environmental policy, environmental change, and so on. And then they dive into that topic and focus all their efforts on that one single issue. So instead of joining one of the big political parties in the country, they'll rather choose to join an NGO focusing specifically on the issue they are oriented at. So I think that's really different in our generation, which also unites our generation across the continents. And one other thing I observed is that the young generation is really aware of its power and is aware how it can use specifically social media and the internet to kind of execute that power. And that's something really interesting to observe, because social media has become such a powerful tool in politics, but on the other hand, maybe also a really dangerous tool, because it's really hard to have a constructive discourse on and discussions on social media. But most of the times, it's rather one person shooting out their own opinion and selling it as the one and only truth. And that's a huge problem also of our generation, I believe.
Belinda, do young people in Africa feel empowered? And does social media give them a sense of being heard?
Okay, so Africa has a history of a very politically apathetic youth, but now we are seeing more and more youth starting initiatives to address some of these issues that we are facing as a young generation. So, for example, most of them, we have, my generation, we're very tech savvy. So we have smartphones, and there is adequate access to internet in most African countries right now as compared to before. So we are able to access the social media and post about issues and render our voices on different issues. I'll give you an example of, for example, in Nigeria, the Bring Back Our Girls campaign. When the Boko Haram abducted girls from Chibok Girls High School in Nigeria, it attracted the attention of the international community, the local government and the international communities. And we were able to get back at least 112 out of the girls who were abducted. Then when we go to South Africa, we also had the Fees Must Fall campaign, where the students were campaigning against the unnecessary, they called it increment of school fees without consulting them appropriately. Then we also have Data Must Fall campaign for South Africa. South Africa data has been very expensive for a long time. Then you had a large number of young people taking to social media and taking part in the campaign to ensure that the data costs come down so they can be able to use data and do whatever they have to do. And it attracted the attention of the president, and he constituted a committee to look into that. And eventually they have been able to address the issue. And now data is a bit affordable in South Africa. So yes, the African generation, the current young African generation that we have, we are more issue-based. We are involved, we are civically involved, and we want to get more involved in public affairs and to address the issues that are affecting us, as compared to before, when we just used to cry to the government to do for us everything.
And was the government responsive when ever?
Well, before, no. It was met with violence, like, for example, I know so many young Africans who were involved in human rights activism. And when they started, maybe 5 years ago, there was a lot of, frustration, because, you could get deregistered. Maybe if you're an organization, if you speak against the regime, maybe you're speaking to a human rights violation of some sorts. So they deregister you, or you get jailed, or you're beaten, or, they frustrate your family members. But right now things are changing, because we read more. We read our constitution more, we know our rights more, and people are getting more and more enlightened on why they should be involved in these things. We are learning more about democracy. So things are getting better for us, and the young people are involved, and that makes me happy.
How do how do political structures channel popular unrest in African countries? Is that possible? And has the internet emerged as a force? I mean, for example, in the Middle East, in countries like Egypt, let's say, where there really, there's very limited press freedom, where there really, there's very few political parties. The internet has emerged as a very important means of creating pressure, expressing popular opinion. Is that also the case in Africa? And if so, is it country by country, or is there a broader community of young activists in the African continent who share common goals and interests?
Okay, so that one varies from country to country, but maybe I can just make a mention of 3 countries that I know. Obviously, you cannot freely use social media to critique the government, whether it is positive or not. So, for example, Burundi, Uganda, Zimbabwe, and before the Gambia. Now they have a bit, the current government is a bit tolerant to dissent. So it's different for them. It's getting better. In Kenya, we have freedom of expression, and other sub-Saharan African countries, we have fairly adequate freedom of expression. So we're able to take to the social media and express our opinion on issues.
Well, that sounds very encouraging. And to get back to a question that I raised at the beginning, how much do you feel that young African people have in common with their counterparts in Europe and the U.S.? We sometimes in the U.S. we sometimes refer to what we call first world problems. It's a little dismissive, like, well, yes, I know, you can't, like your internet service is not reliable, but that's a first world problem. Maybe you should think about, your advantages relative to people in other countries. Does this come to the surface in your relationships with younger activists in more developed societies?
Well, I would say generally, younger people globally are becoming more issue-based. We want to get involved in political processes. We want to be involved in legislations in our country. We want our voices to be heard on issues. So I think that is the common ground for all of us. That's what we agree on, all of us. That whatever is happening in your country, you have to get down and dirty, get involved, get yourself involved in providing some solution of some sorts. It's not like before. Like I told you, in Africa, we just used to complain. We have people who we refer to as keyboard warriors. So I get on Facebook and I write a very long post complaining about why the president is doing this, why the president is not doing this, but then I do nothing beyond that. Okay, but now we go ahead and actually organize platforms for younger people to have constructive conversations on these issues. And then after that, we try to scale them up to policymakers to see if it can influence public policy.
So you're creating a kind of feeder system for popular feedback that you hope will result in actual change, government response. Are you seeing that happen? Yeah. That's very exciting.
Yes, we are seeing that happen. There's so many examples I can give you. Okay, maybe not influenced directly, but at least by the time they pass a certain legislation, you can attribute it to a conversation that you had before. I'll give you an example of what happened recently. After we had our conversation with Bridge USA and Bridge Europe on police brutality and police reform in Kenya, I had a media interview where I did a feature story on why we had that particular event and why we were solely focusing on police brutality and police reform in Kenya. So when it gets to the media, then you're already attracting the attention of the right people, because the media can also help shape opinions, and the media will air the story, and then it will attract the attention of another person who is supposed to hear it.
I see. thanks for sharing. We're gonna come back to these questions because I think we're all particularly interested in you know the drama of youth activism in an environment where it isn't necessarily safe to speak up. Jonathan, I want to come back to you and talk a little bit about what's going on in the U.S. right now as we're approaching a very hotly contested election in a very, very polarized environment. What is Bridge USA doing in a constructive way to try to be helpful, and also just to advance your mission and take advantage of what is happening in the country?
Definitely. I mean, I think one of the big problems that we're seeing this year is with COVID and everyone being kind of isolated from their regular communities. And then also with the highly polarized election, probably one of the most polarized elections we've seen in, I don't know, as long as I can remember at least. A lot of young people feel a little bit more disengaged. They're a little bit more pessimistic. And I think that it is incumbent upon us and as like a society to help fix that and to move people forward in a constructive way. And that's what we're really trying to do, right? Give people that sense of community that they're missing and help them think about the future and where we can work together. So first with Bridge, we've moved all our operations online, right? And we are working to really try to create these online communities where people are able to interact with each other, are able to discuss issues, able to discuss what they're seeing in the news and talk to each other about what they're feeling and how they want to address it. And I think that we've been able to successfully actually host a lot of discussion. And surprisingly, even to us, a lot of people are actually really looking for that type of discussion right now because they feel like there is nowhere else to go. And I think that these spaces need to be had, especially on the college community or on the college campus. In terms of like the election, we're really looking forward past the election. What happens next, right? No, Biden wins, Trump wins. What do you do the next day? What happens the day after that? And what we're really trying to do is prepare people to think about, okay, what are the issues I care about? What are the ways in which I can engage with others on moving forward, on say like creating solutions, discussing ideas, understanding different beliefs, and what are the ways in which like I as an individual can make an impact? And we're trying to help people really see where they fit into this larger picture and start to create that change in their own communities. I think like leading up to this election specifically, we're really trying to focus on like a lot of local elections and things as well, because I think far too often we are focused on like the big story, the big clash, right? Like the national presidential election. But also extremely important is your local representatives, your state representatives, state senators, your people who are representing you in your county, right? And you vote for every single one of those people and they impact your daily lives so much that we're really trying to focus our communities on looking at what is impacting them locally and how they want to move, like address that and what they want to see there. I think like what Belinda was talking about earlier, where Bridge Africa customized a lot of things to the local communities. We do this within our chapters everywhere, where like there are general guidelines that we put forth. There's shared purpose, there's the shared mindset, Bridge mindset, but all of our chapters tailor what they do in their programming to their communities and what they see best. Because we as like a national organization don't know like what is best for like a local community, and what's best for Berkeley is different than ASU, than Notre Dame, than Oregon State, right? And we always try to like help chapters tailor their programming and what they do and what they discuss to the local community and what will impact people in their circles the most.
Konstantin, are the perception from the U.S. of Europe is that it's a little more unified than the U.S. That there's there are differences, obviously, but the extremes don't seem to be as extreme in Europe as they are, particularly wealth and cultural differences. After all, Europeans have lived on the same continent for a couple thousand years. Many of them are multilingual, well-traveled. Reasonably, there's a kind of a uniform standard of middle class, affluence, or at least security. There isn't a tremendous amount of racial disparity, although that has become more of an issue in Europe in the last couple of decades, with large-scale migration particularly from North Africa and the Middle East. In your context, what are the stress points? Where are the differences that you're trying to engage and bridge?
So maybe first of all, the difference to the US, or a reason why it might seem that Europe isn't as polarized as the US, is probably also due to the party system, because most of the European, or at least continental European country party system, whereas you in the US have a party system of two really big and influential players, basically, that are at the moment really clashing. And it seems like everyone has to choose a side. At least that's how it seems for me when I look at the US. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why, at least in continental Europe, the political debate or polarization isn't as extreme, because there's always an option for a new party coming up. And there's always a considerable amount of people in every country who are interested in a society that sticks together and don't support politicians that work on polarizing and dividing societies. So I think that's where the difference might come from. We don't have a lot of polarization in Europe in general. It probably just takes other forms, and it depends a lot on the different countries. So we have a few countries with extremely strong new right populist parties. If we look at France with the Front National, or the movement of Matteo Salvini in Italy. So countries, influential big countries in Europe, that also have new parties, new players in their societies and political arenas that are actively working on dividing and polarizing the society. And you have mentioned the refugee crisis of 2015, or the massive waves of migration in the last couple of years, or in the last decade. And that's probably the most dividing issue in Europe at the moment. We can see that also at the right now. I think yesterday the European Commission, so the executive organ of the European Union, has presented a new plan for how to deal with that refugee crisis, as it's called. And again, it was seen that the member states couldn't agree on a common position. And that's the issue since 2015. And that also leads to a lot of division among the different countries. So maybe we have that division within the nation states, but also among the nation states. And I think that's a huge issue in Europe at the moment. Due to the experience with the Brexit, there's like a constant fear that this European peace project might actually dissolve and break apart.
So how do you all use the same methods and program structure to engage these issues, or are they adapted for different contexts?
I would say the program structure is pretty much the same. It's usually the topics and the ways that the questions are addressed that are different. But very often, right, like we'll have discussions, large group discussions, where we bring everyone together and have, like, say, guide them through a conversation where people are just kind of discussing and getting their views out there and sharing what they believe. We bring in speakers, and often like pairs of speakers with different perspectives, to show students viewpoint diversity, and then have them engage with the speakers so they have the ability to really understand what the speaker's perspective is and what other people believe. I think like most of our structures are all set up similarly, and it's the way in which we execute on it that varies slightly.
I'm curious to know a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of the program. I know that one of your goals is to foster what you call the ability to constructively disagree. What does that mean, and how do you achieve that?
So I think that constructive disagreement, or constructive engagement as we call it, is taking away that winner take all one-on-one debate style of engaging with different viewpoints and really approaching conversations with empathy, with honesty, and with respect for the other person. I think that oftentimes we're too often looking to respond to what someone's saying and kind of win the argument or get a point in favor of our side, instead of acknowledging the good points that other people make, understanding the values that they stand for, and really respecting their position even if we do disagree with it. This is something that you see at like intentionally set up in, like, say, interviews or debates or conversations anywhere all across media, and especially on social media. It's all about just winning those little one-liner points that often lead to this kind of combative atmosphere around political discussion. And we really try to break that with this constructive mindset focused on empathetic engagement.
Belinda, the divisions in the U.S. and Europe seem to be pretty ideological to me. Is that the case in Africa, or are you dealing with differences, grounded in other realities?
So generally, politics in Africa is very ethnocentric and largely based on political party ideologies. So I'll give you an example of Kenya. So I am Luo, which means automatically somebody would assume that I would support the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga through his ODM party, and not Jubilee, which belongs to which is our president, who is from a different ethnic community, Kikuyu. So it is very largely ethnocentric. And then, for example, if I am supporting ODM, if I belong to ODM, I have to support everything that the party says. You have to there's the culture of coercion, in terms of you have to agree with everything that the party says in terms of policy, in terms of how the elections are going to be conducted, in terms of who I am going to vote for. So all these things are going to be shaped by where I come from and who is my political kingpin. That's in Kenya. And this one plays the same way in Ghana, for example, where they're having elections in December this year. So there's a lot of campaigns that is going on currently, and it is the same situation. So they have two major political parties. They have the NPP and the NDC. The NPP is the one that has the current president is the chairperson, and then now the NDC is considered to be the opposition party. And if you see the way we normally just start a conversation on social media, and the agreements are based on which political party you are supporting. It's not based on issues. It's not about, I think NPP has a good manifesto. I think we should vote them in so that they can implement some of these things, and then you can have a better country. No, it's based on the president is this tribe, and the president is in this party, and therefore I am supporting him because of that, and not because of the issues that they're saying they're going to fix. And the same thing for South Africa, the EFF, the Democratic Alliance, and the African National Congress. The youth, largely, we are having political conversations based on which political parties we belong to, rather than the issues that we are supposed to address. So that is what happens with politics in Africa.
Is there any other Pan-African youth organization that has any clout?
Sorry?
I'm asking if there's any kind of Pan-African youth movement, something that draws young people together from, regardless of what country they come from. I ask because the Bridge program seems to be something that, although people are, your members are presumably focused on what's happening in their own countries, they seem to have a kind of a broader awareness of themselves as young people facing similar problems across the continent. Does that have any potential, do you feel, to gather momentum and to become more of a political factor?
Okay, so we have several youth organizations that are working to fix governance in Africa, but I would say that Bridge Africa is very unique. Why? Because we are creating a platform for young people to freely air their views on issues, but then you also encourage diversity of thought, which is very rare in this continent, like I've told you before. So we have the opportunity to reshape the political climate generally in Africa from the current polarized one to a more tolerant generation of young African leaders, and even to influence the next generation of African leaders.
So do you have chapters in all or most African countries?
Oh no, we just started last year, March, and now we have, don't know how many are there, 6 chapters in Africa?
Mm-hmm.
And out of the 6, we have 4 of them which are operational, 2 of them we're still working on, but I'm sure that we're going to grow with time.
Mm-hmm. And is
Yes.
that are your chapters university based or just freestanding clubs or associations?
We are university based, so we have chapters in these 6 universities which are headed by chapter leaders, student chapter leaders, but you're working in collaboration with university administrations, because I think this is standard for all the 3 of us. I mean, you have to register Bridge Africa as a club in your school before you can officially start, running events around the organization. So they're mostly chapter based, but now we are trying to reach out to the community outside of our higher learning institutions through community based projects, which I told you we're working on.
Coming back to the question of viewpoint diversity and engaging difference, I think it's the general impression here in the US that people on different sides have absolutely no respect for people on the other. They think their opinions are based in ignorance, prejudice, malice, stupidity. I don't hear a lot of respect and tolerance or interest in other people's points of view. I hear instead a lot of dismissive comments. People's even people that I know and talk to have difficulty granting any legitimacy to the other side. So on the one hand, it's very encouraging for me to hear that in the U.S. and Asia, and Europe, for example, that you're discovering at a younger level that there is such tolerance. But is that really what you find? Konstantin, is that the case? Do you find that, so that you talked about the rise of this sort of new populist right wing, these parties, which, when we hear about them in the US, they're just always described as just dreadful and motivated by they have terrible motives, and they're turning back the clock on civilization itself back to the Middle Ages. Is that really how young people think about these phenomena?
I would say a lot of young people at the university campuses actually do think like that. So, and it's also a picture that is kind of portrayed in the media sometimes, or also by other political actors for obvious reasons, because suddenly in the political arena you have a new player, and these parties are not really positioned on the let's say socio-economic left-right scale, but they are very much focused on cultural issues. So they often, their manifestos often lack important policy areas, but they have that one issue they are really strong in and where they own issue ownership, and that's migration. And the way how other political actors are reacting to these new populist parties still has to be, or there still has to be found the right way to act with them, because there were like different steps. At the beginning of 2015, there was a huge discussion on the public TV channels whether you should invite these politicians or not, because what people realized was whenever we invite them to the talk shows, they just use the show to basically promote their own issue and weren't interested in a constructive debate. So at the beginning, some TV channels decided to simply not invite them. And that, of course, was also not the right way, because a lot of people then in the society got angry about it and actually supported the new right-wing populist parties just because of that, because they said, look, there's a political elite, there's a kind of academic issues we are constantly facing, how to deal with them, how to engage in discussions, and how to make sure that all the other political actors don't become one unified mess and you can't see the difference between the other more centered political actors anymore. So that's also a huge problem for the other parties, because they often focus on attacking the right-wing populist party and don't engage anymore in discussions among themselves. So yeah, there are a lot of issues in that regard.
So it seems like you're trying to promote not just engagement, constructive engagement, but a completely different mindset, a mindset that values difference, and that seems like a different way, really a different way of dealing with difference, whatever form it may take. Is that fair to say?
Yes, because I think our globalized world is so fast and quick, and so many things are going on all the time. And I understand everyone who feels overwhelmed by that. And there are a lot of changes going on with digitalization. We realize that we really have to step up our efforts in environmental protection, and like many issues like that, which seem to be overwhelming. And it's almost natural that the discussions are getting really heated among these issues. And what I personally believe is that we have to celebrate difference, and that we have to be okay with having different opinions. It must be possible to disagree on an issue and still be friends afterwards. And I think that's really important for our society, that we don't lose that ability to actually cherish differences and realize that it doesn't have to divide our whole society if we disagree on a few issues.
Jonathan, what I have found in my personal life and also professionally is the power of 3 words: I don't know. When people ask me, what's your position on this, and what's your position on that, and what's your explanation, and what's your defense, and what about this, and what about that? Sometimes I just feel like the best thing to say is, look, I don't know, because, and this is kind of a Socratic move, it's sort of like, well, maybe we don't know. Maybe we should acknowledge that we share what we share is, our ignorance, that we have this ignorance is a very powerful common ground, because the truth is, because the media is constantly telling us you have to have a position on this, you have to have a position on that, and you're fed, facts and arguments that come from a different point of view. And, but in reality, most of us don't know enough to have a fixed position on every issue that might come up in an election. Have you tried that as a tool? Does that work for you guys?
I mean, so as individuals, we always say, like, it's okay if you don't know. That's the whole point of this, right? Not everyone knows anything. Just like you said, like, not everyone needs to have an opinion on every single thing all the time, right? I think a lot of the benefit for Bridge comes also from the fact that like people can come here to learn and come here to learn about the different perspectives that are out there in a place where they won't be attacked for not knowing, they won't be criticized for not being, well versed on every single technicality available for every single issue. It's a place to learn and grow. And for the people that are already strong advocates for their positions and have their policy positions set, they have the ability to advocate constructively for what they believe to this group. And for the people that don't know and are trying to learn, they have the ability to learn from so many different perspectives at the same time and make the judgment themselves on what they believe, not just on what one person, one media source, or one Facebook post or whatever says they should believe. And I think that is the real power of Bridge. You have people from all different backgrounds, all different levels of knowledge, all different political ideologies, who are all there to teach each other and learn from each other and grow from that and go forward.
That's a very appealing vision, very attractive. I'm curious to hear your broader thoughts, each of you, about activism as a way of life. Activism didn't used to be considered a lifestyle option. When I was young, it was for people who were in, let's say, like the civil rights movement in the U.S. was largely driven by clergy and by professional organizations that were established to advance certain civil rights issues and interests. But now it's become a kind of a general thing. It's just, and particularly as more and more generations of young people have come along, the feeling of responsibility, I guess, is what I'm interested in exploring with you. The way in which young people have taken personal responsibility for not just changing the world, but saving the planet. Big issues that they feel personally responsible to address. How does this? Do you notice this? And is there a from within the horizon of your own generation, do you have any perspective on the different ways in which young people are engaging as activists?
I mean, I think like activism is something that everyone should kind of think about. And I guess it depends on to what extent you define activism. Is it like when people really care about an issue and are willing to take action on it, or are you talking about someone who is full-time working solely for the advancement of a particular position? I think that with the first definition, right, I think there's a far, like, everyone that we meet and has something that they care about, and they just need a way in which they can apply that and to create change, the change that they want to see. I think that everyone wants to create change and to make the world around them better, at least for the most part, and to positively impact their community. It's about how they go about doing it that determines like how effective it is. But I think as a way of life or as something that people care about, I think it has definitely increased because people know so much more about their local communities and also at like a global sense, right? You understand a lot about how trends are taking shape across the globe. And I think people feel a stronger responsibility now that they have the knowledge that they actually have the ability to do something about it.
Konstantin, is there in Europe any discussion or debate among young activists about how to go about activism? What attitude should be adopted? Should it be confrontational? Should it be, inviting? So I think some of these conversations must be happening because young people, activists, want to be effective. What do you hear from people your age about these questions?
Yeah, these questions are definitely discussed. To name an example, I experienced that myself in Maastricht in the Netherlands, where I study. A lot of student associations united to organize a climate march. So they wanted to protest for more environmental protection. And I think it was about 12 different student associations coming together and agreeing that they wanted to organize this event. But so they gathered in a huge room, and soon they realized how different their opinions were. So you had Extinction Rebellion that said, okay, it's not enough anymore to just shout out your political opinion. We need to be more aggressive in the way we deliver our message, because environmental protection is so pressing that we don't have time to wait that people change their opinion. And then you had people who were way less aggressive in their way. They wanted to promote their issue. So the whole group struggled a lot so they called themselves Maastricht Climate Network, and they struggled a lot on how to actually promote environmental protection. So even though they agreed on that one goal, there are many different ways of doing that. And there are groups who, for example, are convinced that you have to abolish capitalism to protect the environment. And others believe, no, actually, the forces of the free market are those who can actually help us in this situation. So there are definitely discussions going on about what is the right form of activism and how do we express our political opinion the best. And maybe to add to what Jonathan has said before, why activism has become so attractive for our generation, what I observe is that our lives are so fast and changing so quickly. In the last 4 years, I have lived in 3 different countries, studied in 2 different cities, and I'm also pretty sure that I won't have the same job all my life like my grandpa did. He just worked for decades in one company, lived in one village, and had a really stable life. So for him, it was okay to wait 4 years for the next election. But I think many in my generation feel like 4 years is too much to wait for change. So they just perceive their role in the democracy and don't limit their role to voting once every 4 years, but actually believe that they have to be active almost every day.
Belinda, do young people in Africa believe that they can change the world through their activism?
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to start by saying that activism in Africa has been, for a long time, misconstrued to mean, going to the streets, taking part in political action that is mad with chaos, carrying all manner of paraphernalia. But now we have a generation of activists who now understand that that is not really what activism is about. Like personally, I believe in issue-based, peaceful activism that is assertive, but that can respectfully demand accountability from our governments and build a democracy that is good for all Africans. So yes, I mean, so long as you are addressing an issue that is important to you, we can do it through our different professions. We can do it through the platforms that we are organizing. You're already in activism, and we are more and more people, especially the young generation, is beginning to realize that that is the way to go for us to get our voice heard and to address some of the issues that we consider important to us.
I'm curious about, and one of the questions that has come up in our comment thread has to do with the way in which your activism has impacted your personal lives. Belinda, you come from obviously from a complex, your family is complicated, your society is complicated. All of us in different ways are dealing with difference and otherness and are challenged by that in certain ways. What would you say about this? How has your involvement in this kind of work affected your relationships, family and personal and professional relationships? Belinda, would you start with that question?
Okay, so I have been involved in various forms of activism since 2014, and I work with government. I work with the judiciary as well here in Nairobi. So the first thing that happened to me is that when I wrote an article, which I think was a bit alarmist on police brutality and police reforms in Kenya, one of the judges of the Supreme Court called me and told me, "You're going to lose your job." And then I thought that was going to be it. But then another person also called me and told me, I think you should just consider leaving the judiciary because nobody's going to be able to tolerate your viewpoints. Because I was very assertive and I was writing articles to address the issues that I was actually personally also experiencing as a citizen of this country. So I have been involved from 2014, and I have been able to address a lot of issues that are affecting me as a person and my community and my country and our continent. I've been to different conferences and workshops where we just talk about issues, and we try to scale up the conversation to attract the attention of different people. So it is working. I think it has brought about a significant amount of positive change that I would want to see, not just in Kenya, but in other countries as well. For example, there was a time I was working with an organization called Students for Liberty, and one of our country coordinators for the Gambia got arrested. So we took to the social media, Twitter, Facebook, and all the other social media, and we were just calling for his release, and it actually caught the attention of the right person, and the guy was released. So activism, to me, is very important, and we can use it to bring about positive change in terms of legislations, in terms of driving the general development agenda of our continent.
Something that has come up, also a question that's come up in our comment thread, has to do with with the relationship of activists to politicians. The perception is in general that the politicians can do things, can act, and because they're set up, to because they have a place in the superstructure. And yet it turns out to be difficult, even within the government, to make change. Do your conversations end up, do they produce any greater, let's say, compassion for politicians, a class of people it's hard to feel compassion for sometimes? But do we understand better from being activists in this arena what a difficult position people in public life occupy, and how difficult it is to change things that they don't necessarily control?
One thing I would say is, like, within the discussions, I think is when people really start to understand the difficulty of establishing this kind of like shared purpose or common goal that we would want before we can create change on a certain issue, right? So like, say for a politician that has a diversity of different constituents and who are all telling him, I want this, I want this, I want this, like how do you balance all those different interests? And I think that when people come to a discussion and see the diversity of viewpoints just within a single, say, like campus or a small, just that one room of people who are involved in that discussion, you start to really understand the difficulty in figuring out exactly what the right answer is, because everyone has a different perspective. And that's why I think we say it's so important that you focus on understanding the values of someone who has a different perspective than you. One story that we always like to tell is at our Berkeley chapter, we were having a discussion on immigration. And this was shortly after, I believe there's some executive order related to DACA and Dreamer students and things like that. And we had one student who was a DACA recipient herself, who like stood up and started talking about how this legislation or this order directly affects her personal life and how it is literally taking away the opportunities that she has to move forward. And directly after her statement, one student just reached into his bag, pulled out a MAGA hat, and put it on. And usually at Berkeley, this does not get a very good reaction, I'm sure you can imagine. And it is usually met with a very strong response, right? And we were surprised in this discussion where everyone just kind of turned, looked at him, said, all right, that's fine. And actually what impressed all of like everyone in that room the most is that student, that DACA student that just stood up and advocated for herself, and other students like her, decided to like engage in conversation with him. It wasn't a shouting match. It wasn't like any sort of battle that devolved into like name calling. She asked him, okay, why do you feel that DACA students should not receive the benefits or the like provisions set in place? And he started talking about how he lives in a community near the border, focused on how his family sometimes feels threatened. And then she was able to speak to those same values and say, yes, I feel threatened in the same way you are. I feel unstable. My family feels unstable or unprotected in the same way that you are talking about border security when it comes to like DACA and the DREAM Act. And like those kinds of conversations show the diversity within one area, but also show that we can reach a common set of values and speak to each other's values and move forward.
Well, that's very encouraging, because it is important for us to not just so much to set aside our differences. And I guess that if I were to try to reflect back what I'm hearing, you're not telling people not to have differences. You're not telling people that their differences are illegitimate or illusory or figments of their imagination. They're real. What you seem to be doing instead is saying, let's respect each other's differences and try to find our way to the values that we share. We all want we want security, opportunity. We want to be able to, raise our families. We don't want to be, pushed around, told what to do. And that's, that seems like a very, not just a wholesome way of approaching bridging difference, but also it's universally applicable. So let me ask you, while we're speaking of universal application, what are your plans for further expanding the Bridge program to other parts of the world? Is that in your vision of the future?
I think definitely longer term, yeah. I mean, I think that the principles and the Bridge mindset is something that is applicable and helpful to any community, right? It's just about bringing people together and actually understanding what you believe, why, and how we can move forward effectively. And I think we would be more than happy to expand to different places. I think right now we're definitely focused on building up and helping like our own chapters as well as Bridge Europe and Bridge Africa. But yeah, definitely not opposed to expanding. And I think hopefully in the future there's a Bridge chapter on every campus.
I'm curious also to ask it. Probably, I think I know the answer, but these programs, these sessions that you sponsor, sound like they're pretty dramatic at times, and might be valuable and interesting for people who are not participating to be able to watch. And yet, I think probably also want to preserve some privacy and sort of the sanctity of the intimacy of these gatherings. Do you have any thoughts about whether these kinds of proceedings can be shared usefully?
Yeah, so for most of our events and most of our discussions are not recorded or shared just because we want people to feel comfortable to share their perspectives and know that that is a space in which they can be open and honest without facing criticism from something outside or having their words misconstrued after the fact. But we do host public events pretty regularly, at least like once a month or so, sometimes even more frequently than that. And these events are all live streamed on Facebook. Occasionally they are on YouTube as well. And if you go to our Facebook account for Bridge USA, you'll be able to see like some of our past ones. We actually have one coming up on October 6th. So there regularly are events that people can participate in, that people can see, that we do host.
Now, in terms of how we can support you, first of all, I guess I would ask, and how can we, particularly older people, let's say, support your work in informal ways? What do you usually say to want to help?
Well, the first thing I would say is, and this is one of our team members actually said it best, is there's a danger in only seeing one story. And far too often we only hear that one story from people, and we make all of our perceptions and our understandings of others from that one story. We often start to see this now in like generational divides as well, where like young people and older people have this mischaracterization or one characterization of the other group, and all perspectives and all understanding is based off of that. And I think the first thing I would say is for everyone to share their stories and share their perspectives with people in their community and around them, because it's important for people to understand that there's different perspectives, different ways people were raised, different values people hold, and that's the only way that we'll be able to connect with each other and move forward. In terms of formally supporting Bridge USA, I'd say first, start a chapter. If you know people around you, if you know young people on a campus, we're always looking to grow our chapter presence and expand to new communities. If you are connected to university administration, to professors, reach out to us and we'll be happy to help you start a chapter. Second, I'd say engage with us online. Come to our public events, go to our social media, subscribe to our newsletter, get involved in this community and get connected, because you'll be able to see all the different opportunities that do come out of our regular programming and special initiatives and so on. Lastly, if you are able, I mean, we always ask to donate and to support us financially, especially during this time when like it's difficult, right? We know that not everyone can donate, but if you can support a chapter, help us launch a new chapter, help sponsor the Bridge Institute, help us launch a Bridge region, get 5 chapters into one area, and really impact a local community. Those are the ways I think that we really could use help the most.
Belinda, I'm curious in particular to know how we can support your work in the African context, and I'm wondering, do you publish any kind of a newsletter or update on your activities that people can subscribe to? You're muted.
Sorry. So basically, we're still being run by Bridge USA. We get a lot of support from John in terms of maybe recording our events, keeping some sort of database on the events that are coming up, the ones that we've already done. So we don't have any newsletter for just Bridge Africa for now, but I'm sure we'll get there. So the way in which you can support us, I'll start with you, Adam, is you've already done that by having me on this platform, for example, to be able to talk about what the work that Bridge is doing in Africa and our programs and everything. So the other way that anyone else who is willing can support us is by introducing us to maybe like-minded organizations in Africa who are involved in doing similar work. And also in terms of capacity building, if we can get on a platform like this and then we just talk to our chapter leaders maybe on marketing strategies. We bring on an expert to speak to us about marketing strategies and other different areas of expertise to enable us build capacity to do this, to be more effective and create more impact with our programs. And also, like everything that John said, done twice, would just support, Bridge Africa as well, because we are a similar organization, just different team leads.
Jonathan, have you thought about expanding your program to include older people? I know that you're primarily focused on youth. Adding it to other to.
I believe you're asking about chapters for older people, or working with older people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we specifically don't have. Yeah. So we don't have like current plans for creating chapters specifically for older people. But what we always say is at these bases, at these campus chapters, anyone is able to participate, right? Like we often have people from the public from all different generations come and participate in our discussions. Our focus is like on creating the next generation of youth leaders that can continue to create change once they move out of college. But that's not to say that we don't want anyone from any other generations participating. We'd love to have those different perspectives. We just work specifically on our programming in college chapters.
Well, I think it's pretty much time for us to wrap up, but I want to thank you all for making time in your, to come together with a kind of, in an internet conversation across multiple time zones. Really appreciate it. I just want to say we love what you do. We're eager to work with you more. As with Manu, we're going to have a multi-day event later in the fall. We'd love to include you, perhaps to lead some direct, training workshops, developing leadership capacity in younger people. That's very exciting to us. And we hope that you'll all come back for further discussion of these important issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam, for having us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been our pleasure.